Welcome into an Inside Carolina Postgame podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. That's Rob Harrington. Um, 3 games in 3 days or 3 nights. Rob, Carolina falls to Michigan State 94-91. Um, a lot to talk about. We're not going to talk about it for long, though, because it is late once again. It is actually Thanksgiving Day here on the East Coast. But, Rob, your overall thoughts, and let's dig into it.
Yeah, I mean there's no sugarcoating it. This was a devastating loss. One of those losses that could come back to haunt the team at the end of the season. I thought when the roster came together in the summer going into the fall, I said, okay, this team has a floor of top 15 floor. And I think what we've seen over the past 2 days is the floor is lower than that. Doesn't mean that they'll fall that low, but the team can be worse than that because the pieces still don't fit together at this stage of the season, and it's not the very beginning of the year. We learned a lot this week. Some of it positive, like Drake Powell, but a lot of it not so positive.
Yeah, I mean, Seth Trimble, Drake Powell, Elliott Cadeau, R.J. Davis has certainly struggled. But the common theme here, Rob, and it continues to be the reason they're losing games like this, and it's going to cost them games like this. It's going to it's going to cost them big games that they could have won. It's going to cost them games like this that they should have won, and that's the slow starts. And I think at this point, and maybe when you get back stateside or mainland, you got to address maybe the starting lineup issue here. This team has come out of the
Yes.
gate and they've blown a tire right out of the gate. And you just can't start that way against good, decent teams. And they're going to play a lot of those good, decent teams in the coming weeks, starting Wednesday night with Alabama.
Ooh, and pressure because if they don't win that one now they're 4-4, and you start hearing 2023 type talk really pick up, and it starts to become a, well, can this team make the tournament situation? I think they will be okay, but yeah, it's rough. I mean, the thing is, Hubert obviously doesn't love the starting lineup because he went away from it during the Michigan State game. Even though they started, he basically put it in the trash bin. I wouldn't be surprised if they make that change for Alabama. I thought they probably would get through the Alabama game before they did anything major with personnel, but I don't think it can wait. It's too much of a pattern. It's happening every single game where they get down early, and you just can't do that. And they of course they understand it, but it doesn't seem like it's going to fix itself. And they have to do everything they can. They have to treat that Alabama game like a tournament game to protect the home court, to get some confidence back in a marquee win that they desperately need.
Yeah, but let's look into the issues here in Maui and specifically against Michigan State. Like we said, the start slow. You give Michigan some confidence. They're playing without their guy that's been playing the best in their Maui, and you let his replacement just go off. Um, a lot of people talk about what Carolina did not get in the portal, and I've always thought about recruiting. The recruiting is not who you don't get. The recruiting is who you do get that doesn't pan out, and that'll be the argument for this team, I think, for the year. But especially in games like this, it continues to prove that the lack of a big post presence, and not saying that Jalen Washington's not big, he's tall, but you've got the two guys for Michigan State that worked them down in the post, and then you've got the big fella that came in the second half, Booker, I think his name is, Xavier Booker. There's just no way to combat that for this North Carolina team, and it puts so much pressure on the offense. But Rob, specifically on the defensive end, it's not just that they can't handle the size inside; it's that they're not preventing them from getting good looks and good ball entry, because that's how you negate a big, right? You prevent them from getting the ball and prevent them from having easy entry passes. And it felt like to me in the first half and then later in the second half that Michigan State was able to get the ball where they wanted it, and Carolina had no answer once it's there.
It's true, and the issue is they aren't able to guard these big guys, and they also aren't providing any rim protection when the guards get beaten. So when the guards go down the middle of the lane, there's no one there to deter them. They're getting real clean shots, and it's forcing the perimeter guys, who are small, of course, to be perfect in terms of ball contain, which they aren't. And in fact, I think some of them, I think R.J. Davis is having a tough year with ball contain. So when he and Ian Jackson, of course, too, which is less surprising in his case because he's a freshman, but these guys are getting beaten off the dribble, and there's just not any help defense behind them. Then when they do miss, the Heels are having a hard time taking care of their defensive backboard. And yet, despite trying to go bigger with the starting lineup, for example, that's not working either. And so Withers ends up being the center for an extended period. And it's really difficult, I think, right now to reconcile the best workable defensive lineup with a lineup that also enables them to maximize what they like to do offensively. And they haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be good on something, right? You got to either be good trying to protect the rim, which they're not. You got to be able to be good to try to prevent the dribble drives. They're not. You got to be good in preventing post entries. They're not. I think it's a buy-in issue. Somebody in the chat mentioned it's a buy-in issue. It's also this team is just not as good as the sum of the parts. I mean, they've got some decent pieces to be good enough. A play that sort of stood out for me, and I can't remember, but Michigan State guy drives and he beats whatever guard it was. It may have been Trimble. And Withers is just standing in the middle of the lane. He's not covering his guy that's still out there. He doesn't go and help. Rob, when you see things like that, and maybe I'm just blowing one play out of proportion, but that kind of summed it up for me. There's no help. When they do help, they're not helping very strongly. But mostly it's just standing around watching teammates get whipped in one-on-one matchups.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because we're so focused on personnel. Not all of the problems defensively or offensively are personnel related at all. The team is disconnected defensively completely. They show stretches where they actually defend okay, especially when the guards get out and pressure some. So at least they're pushing the offense out a bit, gives them a little bit more cushion. But a lot of the times they aren't talking, they aren't coordinated. That's showing up on offense too, but it's more drastic on defense because they don't have the playmakers to make up for it. So when they have these breakdowns, when they are disconnected, they don't have a remedy. And they gave up. I mean, Michigan State must have scored on 7 or 8 possessions in a row in the second half, and that is not a good offensive team, especially gumped up the way they were tonight, missing a key player.
Yeah, you look at it, Michigan State shoots 54% on the game, Carolina 50%. Carolina outshot them from 3, 11 threes to 4. Free throws were 24-16 in favor of Michigan State. Rebounds, 37-29, Michigan State. Offensive rebounds, roughly whatever. Bench points were crazy. Points in the paint for Michigan State, and this speaks to what we're talking about, 50-30 for Michigan State. That is just something that can't happen. I can understand the guards giving up plays, but you can't have guys just getting paint touches and scoring 50 points in a game. Somebody in the chat asked what was the layup deal. Let's see if I can find it. I'll find it before we get out of here. We're talking with Rob Harrington on the Inside Carolina Postgame Podcast. I mentioned Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com, and Congruity, Matt at congruityhr.com for a free assessment. Rob, let's talk a little bit about the offense because you mentioned 2023 last night, and it feels like 2023 where it's pounded into the I wanted to say concrete because I'm still a backyard ball guy, but pounded into the wood, either drive and try to get fouled and hunt a foul, make a layup, or kick it to those corner threes. I love Drake Powell out there. I think Drake Powell, he played 33 minutes tonight and came up huge for North Carolina, but I'm not sure if he's not the only option. Seth Trimble, of course, hit a big 3. Your take on this offensive approach, it seems like they have regressed, especially when they get stuck in the half court, to that 2023 model.
Yeah, they just aren't, and this again goes back to the front court. They do a lot of high ball screens. That's something Hubert Davis loves. But this year, unlike when Bacot was there, they aren't the guy setting the screen, usually a big guy, isn't getting any respect from the defense. He's not a roll threat. He's not a pick and pop threat. And they're basically able to focus on the UNC guards and let that guy run free and see if he will make a play. And UNC isn't finding the big guy and for good reason, because when they are getting touches, by and large, they aren't converting, and they just aren't being active enough. So what happens is you get an ineffective screen with some dribbling, and then you get some reverse dribbling, and everyone else is just standing on the perimeter, in theory, to spread the defense. And that's how you end up with these ugly possessions where with no passing, just dribbling, and the guards are good enough to get downhill. I mean, that is the offense. The guards are good enough to get downhill, but they're driving into a defense that's waiting for them. So you get these flailing attempts, and all three of the starting guards have been guilty of it, and Ian Jackson too, where they're just not big enough to make those types of plays. They're low percentage shots inside. There's no offensive rebounding coverage. They have to get away from that. They did have a good stretch, I would say this, toward maybe the last 6 or 7 minutes when Cadeau started to play better and he was finding people a little bit more and they were starting to move the ball some, but they have to do that consistently.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the team, and I think it's what's so maddening is that they can play so good in those stretches. The offense can look effective in all those stretches, but then you couple that with the stretches where it just looks brutally bad. And it's the same on the defensive side, the inconsistency. And that's surprising for me to see how inconsistent they are. Consistently inconsistent on both ends of the floor, and that doesn't bode well. Whoever asked the layup question, I can't find it. The chat is rolling very quickly. Almost 500 people in here, Rob. Thanksgiving Day, folks. Spend some time with your families and eat some turkey. Layups for North Carolina, 11 for 28. Worse than it was last night. 11 for 28 at the rim. Everybody's going to talk about Elliot Cadeau's there at the end, and he's obviously got to make that. But I don't think it really changes the outcome a ton. But the bottom line is, Rob, it's like we talked about. You got to be good at something. And Carolina, what can this team be good at with Alabama coming to town? And we'll be in the ACC. We'll be in the ACC race shortly, and I don't think the ACC is great. But watching this team for the last 3 days specifically, what are Carolina's positives that they can build on and win some ball games?
I think that they are moving toward a lineup that is going to be more efficient, and that's going to involve Drake Powell, for one thing. I still think that in the long run, RJ Davis will come along. He's too good a player to have a shooting slump like this. Tonight, he just wasn't good all around. And other than it, he is getting some assists, but by and large, he's off his game. I think once he and Cadeau and Trimble all get on the same page, you'll see the synergy start to unfold, and that will help. It still doesn't address the lack of interior balance. And this layup thing is not like they're missing open layups. Yes, the Cadeau one, but by and large, we already talked about they're taking contested layups, low percentage layups. They have to get away from that. But I think that's the fact that they have these guards who can create and get into the paint. I think that in the long run will be their saving grace. I mean, even though you said they shot 50% in a game where it seemed like for the offense was pretty discombobulated for a lot of it. I mean, it shows you what they can do. They have to fix the defense. It's almost rock bottom defensively, and they have to do better. So I don't think all is lost by any means. I think they'll be better than 2023, but right now, like I said, my floor of top 15, I think, was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, Carolina, I said 50%, 32 of 64 from the field. Somebody do the math. 11 for 28 in layups. They played pretty well otherwise, offensively. At least they made some shots. I do want to ask you, let's talk about RJ and let's talk about Seth Trimble. I think Elliot Cadeau, the part of the maturation process for Elliot is when it goes sideways, it cannot go so completely sideways that you lose your mind and you're going to miss layups and you're going to commit fouls. I thought was it at the end of the first half or whenever they were trying to call a timeout? I don't see much point in trying to pressure the guy. He's going over there to try to call a timeout. But let's talk about those three because I think this season relies on them. Elliot Cadeau's maturation, Rob, and what is it that he needs to do and to figure out as this season goes, because he is a focal point and he's going to be a focal point. How does he get better at understanding that and understanding his importance on the floor, but understanding also is that if it's going bad, just keep playing, keep pushing. Just like, what's it, Dory and Finding Nemo? Just keep swimming. Your take there, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, he's the leader of the team. We talked about that early in the season. It came up again last night. He's the leader of the team, so embrace that. And when you're the leader, people are going to feed off of you. So when he has these outbursts, when something doesn't go his way, it affects everyone else. It's one thing when he did it as a freshman. For one thing, Hubert could sit him. He's too important this year. They have to have him out there, not engaging negatively with officials. Don't get in your head when something goes wrong. You have a turnover or whatever. It's okay. Keep playing, just like you said. Keep playing, and keep the other guys involved because they have to have him. And when he settled down, like the second half of the Dayton game, and I thought he had a real good 10-minute stretch tonight against Michigan State. You see the difference, but it's these stretches where he gets in his own head and he just gets too flustered. I love his passion. He can be a lot of fun. He just needs to channel it positively more consistently.
I agree with that. The passion's unbelievable. Some of the pictures we've seen of him getting joy from his teammates making plays, unbelievable. He just got to balance that. And everybody talks about it can't be high too low. RJ Davis, you mentioned that I don't, I mean, I don't, I, 6 of 18 is not overly terrible, but that stretch there where he could not buy a layup, one thing that I see that RJ does, and we mentioned it just briefly, is that he's hunting a foul in the lane rather than hunting the layup. I don't know if that makes sense to you. It does to me. It's like they're looking for a call rather than just going strong to the basket and try to put the ball in the hole, and then whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he's clearly struggling to figure out where his scoring is going to come from on this team because he's not getting the help from a Baycott like he did last year. As we mentioned, the screen and rolls aren't working for him. You don't have a size complement like Ingram would play some bully ball last year. Doesn't have that. So with everyone keying on him and Cadeau running most of the offense, he's just not getting into his stuff very easily. The threes he's taking are too difficult. Even compared to last year, he's taken real difficult threes. I have thought that he's tried to play a good floor game. His assists are up. He's doing some other things well. Overall tonight, I thought was his worst game in some respects because his energy was down. I thought previously, even though he didn't shoot well, he had good overall games. But tonight, I thought he was just a little listless. Maybe it was legs, but
7 assists and 1 turnover. That's a heck of
right.
a floor game there. And that's another one of those things where if he can just figure out everything else, that has really progressed and come along. And I want to close the show out on a positive moment,
Yes.
and that's going to be Seth Trimble. Hey, young man, we could talk for an hour about how unbelievable he's turned it around. One of the most impressive things he did this week, to me, is not the shots he hit on the floor, is that he was pissed in the post game yesterday. And I thought that would translate into a better performance today. It obviously didn't really, but he continues. We talk about this Elliott's team. RJ, it was his team. It's kind of rolling into this Seth Trimble's team, Rob. What do you think?
I think he would have to handle the ball more. I want the leader of the team, at least of this team, to be the ball handler, just to get everyone into their stuff. But I take your point that maybe he's the heart and soul of the team this season, especially as someone who is now in his third year, didn't play as a freshman, really, was in the rotations in a pretty good way as a sophomore, thought about leaving, came back, and now he's looking like he could be one of those classical Carolina upperclassmen, certainly as a senior. So I like the notion of Trimble stepping into that role, but we'll see. I like for him. I mean, he was pretty quiet most of tonight, really, and then he stepped it up late. But I agree they need someone who's a warrior and who's going to bring that intensity and physicality. And we talked about this a couple of nights ago, where he's physical, whereas Davis and Cadeau have a harder time with that. Of course, Trimble uses his shoulders more, uses his hips more. They need someone to just give them some physical presence.
Indeed, they do. And lastly, Drake Powell and Ian Jackson. Ian Jackson gets a little lost out there. Drake Powell is going to be a fantastic player and already is, makes big shots. And my thing is, if you're not going to get anything from the size out there, then go with the guys that are giving you something. It puts you in a bad spot on the boards, rebounding, defending. But Drake Powell, Rob, I'll let you take a hot take. and it's not really a hot take. Drake over under on Drake Powell starting from here on out. Will Hubert make that move for a freshman over a grad student senior that's been in the fights and the wars for a long time?
I think if they make the change, it's probably going to be Washington taken out with Withers moving to the 5. Because Withers is getting a lot of valuable minutes, and he gives them more defensive versatility and offensive versatility for that matter, because Washington's just not getting enough touches to be effective, even though he's skilled. But the question is, I think it will happen. I think it's 50-50 whether it happens for Alabama or after Alabama. But it's going to be in the next 2 weeks. I don't think that they can dither with it. I think Hubert will make this change. They can't afford to go into the tank. You know the starting front court combo isn't working. It's killing the team in these games in the first half. They've got to try something different. So maybe we'll see it on Wednesday night. I sort of hope so, to be honest, because I don't have much confidence myself in the starting front court. And I think they need to just shake it up, that they can't keep falling behind like that.
Yeah, you can't keep doing what you've been doing because it's obviously not working, at least early. This team has some fight. They show the ability to come back, but you dig yourself in a hole. You spend all the time trying to get out of the hole, and it gets pretty easy just to push you back in it. Michigan State 94, Carolina 91. Rob, it's been a pleasure doing these. We got a lot more to go.
Yes, sir.
Whether or not they win or not, post-game podcasts are going to be stacked. 525 people in here at 12:30 on Thanksgiving morning. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt. Shout out to Congruity. Shout out to Rob Harrington for being a trooper and hanging out with me. All these late night Mauis. We should have done these from Maui, man. We could have been sitting on the beach.
Have. You know, I should have asked you
Wi-Fi.
If we should have done some football first, in case you're not sick of football yet. You know, we can talk about the coaching search if you want to.
Yeah, I will handle those. So this is six live podcasts in the last 36 hours. Yeah.
I think that should be my hot take every show, is to have one comment on football where I know nothing, but what I lack in knowledge, I compensate for with opinionated, uninformed remarks.
Well, join the crowd, my friend. It's been a pleasure. Shout out to everybody from joining us. Everybody be safe. Everybody have a happy Thanksgiving. We'll be back next time live, assuming there's no emergency football podcast to do before then. We'll be back live 9 a.m. on Sunday to talk about North Carolina State with Jason and Buck. Everybody be safe. Take care.